From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm your host, Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, let's take a look at the latest headlines. Russia launches a massive aerial attack on Ukraine's capital city, Kyiv. A missile struck an industrial facility, injuring several people. Ukraine says it shot down 6 missiles and 24 drones. A building fire in a heavily populated market area kills at least 41 people, including expats in Kuwait. The country's interior minister says that more than 30 people are critically injured and being treated for severe burn wounds. At least 41 people die as a brutal heat wave continues to scorch India. Temperatures cross 115 degrees Fahrenheit in several parts of northern and central India. Red alerts have been issued for the regions. Riots erupt in the African nation of Algeria amid a growing water shortage crisis. Months of drought has led residents in central Algeria to fight with each other over scarce water reserves. And the South American nation of Peru signs NASA's Artemis Accord, making them the latest member to join the U.S.-led exploration of space and the moon. We begin with the latest from the Middle East. Israeli officials claim that hostages in Gaza are being moved around by Hamas. Now, while some are being shuttled from one apartment to another, others are being moved to underground tunnels. Now, according to a report citing Israeli officials, Hamas has ordered its members to shoot and kill the hostages if they sense that Israeli forces are in fact approaching. The development comes after the Israeli Defense Forces recently carried out an operation in central Gaza, resulting in the rescue of 4 hostages. Israel's efforts are being further complicated, however, by the fact that hostages are now being hidden in more secure locations. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is meeting officials in Jordan and Qatar in a bid to get regional powers to push for a ceasefire in Gaza. Secretary Blinken also said that additional international support should not stop as it serves as a much-needed lifeline for Palestinian civilians.
As we conveyed directly to the Israeli government, it is crucial to speed up the inspection of trucks and reduce backlogs, to provide greater clarity on and shorten the list of prohibited goods, to increase visas for aid workers and to process them more quickly, to create clearer, more effective channels for humanitarian groups to deconflict with IDF operations.
Now, in a sudden turn of events, a senior Hamas official accepted a United Nations-backed ceasefire resolution just yesterday and has given assurances the group is ready to actually negotiate a deal. But even though Secretary Blinken called this a hopeful sign, he added that it was still not conclusive.
At least what's so far been dispositive one way or another is the word coming from Gaza and from the Hamas leadership in Gaza. That's what counts, and that's what we don't have yet. And that's why I say we're waiting to see. Everyone has said yes, except for Hamas. And if Hamas doesn't say yes, then this is clearly on them.
Israel, however, continues to send mixed messages. accepting the ceasefire proposed by President Joe Biden, though refusing to acknowledge this publicly, all the while continuing to widen Israel's operations in central and southern Gaza, despite saying that Rafah was in fact the last remaining stronghold of Hamas. Now, adding to the chaos and confusion, it remains to be seen how Israel and the United States will in fact react to Hamas ordering the killing of hostages if the Israeli army attempts rescuing more captives. Shifting focus to Russia, which conducted military exercises near the United States in the Atlantic Ocean on Tuesday. The drills involved Russia's nuclear-powered submarine and a naval frigate that are heading to the Caribbean nation of Cuba. The warships fired high-precision missiles at mock enemy targets from a distance of more than 370 miles. Now, these vessels are among the 4 Russian warships en route to Cuba, and they're expected to arrive in Havana today. Now, Cuba says this reflects the historically friendly relations between the two nations. The Russian warships that will dock in Cuba will be carrying the Zircon hypersonic missiles that could be used against both ships and ground targets. Vladimir Putin has touted these missiles as a potent weapon, which have a range of over 600 miles and travel 9 times faster than the speed of sound. Last week, the Cuban government said the Russian warships would not be carrying any nuclear weapons. The statement came after Washington raised alarms as it tracked Russian warships near the Caribbean Sea. Now, the U.S. has said that it does not see Russia's move as threatening. However, the U.S. Navy will continue to monitor these exercises. And joining the United States in tracking the Russian activity is its Latin American ally, Guyana.
The view is that shared by some of our partners is that it's not something that we should worry about, that it doesn't represent a direct threat to Guyana or Guyana's interests. Nevertheless, we're vigilant and we're keeping this issue firmly in our policy radar.
Now, of course, this is not the first time that Russia has in fact sent warships to the Caribbean. However, it is worth noting that their visit to the region comes at a time when Cuba is inviting more and more Russians to visit the country.
We were invited to come and consider the Cuban option, and we picked it because it's a great country and with good people. We had heard a lot about Cuba. Our countries have been friends for years, and, strictly speaking, it's safe here.
Now, with the naval drills in the Caribbean and an increase of Russians visiting Cuba, this projection of power could be more than meets the eye. But of course, time will tell what exactly Putin has up his sleeve. And here in the United States, President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has been convicted by a jury for lying about his drug use on a form when buying a gun, which is illegal. A 12-member jury in a federal court in Delaware found him guilty on all 3 counts, making him the first child of a sitting American president to be convicted of a crime. The 54-year-old could face up to 10 years in prison on the first count, 5 years on the second, and another 10 years on the third count. The U.S. Department of Justice Special Counsel David Weiss, who was appointed by former President Donald Trump, brought the Hunter Biden case, and he spoke after the verdict. He said Hunter Biden's gun trial was not about addiction, but the illegal choices that Hunter Biden made.
No one in this country is above the law. Everyone must be accountable for their actions, even this defendant. However, Hunter Biden should be no more accountable than any other citizen convicted of this same conduct. The prosecution has been and will continue to be committed to this principle.
The trial in Delaware featured testimony from Hunter Biden's ex-wife, former girlfriend, and sister-in-law, who all provided firsthand accounts of his escalating addiction in the period before and after he purchased the gun in October of 2018. Meanwhile, Hunter Biden's legal team aimed to demonstrate that he was not in fact using drugs at the time of the gun purchase and had no intention to deceive. The judge overseeing the case is yet to announce a date for sentencing, but did mention that it would happen within the next 120 days. After the verdict, Hunter Biden was seen leaving the courthouse holding hands with his wife and mother, First Lady Jill Biden. Meanwhile, the president flew to Delaware to see his son, who greeted him at the state's Air National Guard base in Newcastle, Delaware. President Biden said he accepts the outcome of the case and would respect the judicial process as his son Hunter Biden considers an appeal. The commander-in-chief added that he and the First Lady would always be there for their son and that nothing would ever change that. Ironically, at a gun violence prevention summit only hours after the verdict was rendered, President Biden showcased his administration's efforts to cut illegal gun trafficking and reduce gun crime.
This is most important. The only industry in America that has immunity are gun dealers. We got to end it. End it now. No, I mean it. We got to stop it. We got to stop it and stop it now. More children are killed in America by guns than cancer and car accidents combined.
Now, Hunter Biden's conviction comes at a politically fraught time for his father, who is in a tight race with Donald Trump for re-election this November. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, who was convicted of falsifying business records just last month, rejected any suggestion that the trial of his political opponent's son showed the U.S. justice system to be politically impartial. And now moving to southern Mexico, which is grappling with deadly cartel violence. More than 4,000 residents were forced to flee the town of Tila after drug cartels opened fire and burnt down their homes. The violence erupted last week and lasted for 3 days until the Mexican army arrived. The displaced residents, who are now scared of going back to their town, are living in a makeshift shelter. Meanwhile, Mexico's president has downplayed the attack, calling it infighting between the town's residents. Our next report gets you more details about the rising cartel violence in Mexico.
Drug cartels and gangs have wreaked havoc in southern Mexico in recent weeks. Over the weekend, more than 4,000 residents fled the town of Tila in the state of Chiapas because armed gangs opened fire and burnt their houses and vehicles. The violence erupted last week when dozens of armed men stormed the region. They began shooting at houses and businesses and set buildings on fire. Eyewitnesses say the gunmen returned the next day with high-caliber weapons and military outfits. And the siege lasted for 3 days until the Mexican army arrived on the scene. This eventually forced the residents to flee their homes in Tila to a makeshift shelter in a football court in the nearby town of Yajalon. This is probably the biggest mass displacement in Chiapas since 1997.
We have around 4,000 displaced people. But some come at different times, so sometime around 350 sleep here because in Yajalon, we have big hearts, so many have taken shelter in different places. The shelter distributes food to around 2,000 people and we have other places where people go for food.
Now, while some 5,000 troops are patrolling the area since the attack, the displaced residents are still scared of going back to their homes.
Terrorífico. No hay palabras para describirlo. Sentir que tu vida depende de un hilo, que le ruegas a Dios porque no te encuentran, que le pides a todo el mundo ayuda y que nadie puede hacer nada por ti. La preocupación de toda la noche, de sentir que tu hija está a tu lado y que está.
According to Mexico's human rights groups, a gang called Autonomos was behind the violence, which is said to be linked to drug trafficking. Tila residents say the gang members had been extorting them for months. And if their demands were not met, they threatened to kill victims, rape women, recruit young people, and burn their homes.
No pagaron el derecho de piso. Y algunos que sí ya habían pagado, también les quemaron la casa. En mi caso, yo no, o sea que me han querido extorsionar por teléfono, pero cuando yo veo los números, que yo no tengo nada que ver, no contesto.
The Mexican state prosecutors say at least 2 people have died and around 17 buildings have been burnt down in the violent attack. However, the government maintains that the violence in Tila resulted from a local land dispute. Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has depicted the assault as a conflict between the very same people of the town, referring to a long-standing land dispute between farmers. However, Tila is not the only community that has become a ghost town in Chiapas. Battles between rival drug cartels and the army have hit several townships in the Mexican state because the area is a main route for smuggling drugs and migrants. But this has not affected President Obrador, who has long sought to downplay the violence in Chiapas and has accused those who write about it of sensationalism.
And finally, in Europe, in a hot turn of events, Denmark has decided it's time to cool it down. The nation has recalled several popular South Korean ramen noodles, citing safety concerns over their fiery taste. Danish officials say spice levels in the Korean ramen are at poisonous levels. The spicy flavors come from capsaicin, which is essentially a chili pepper extract. Our final report tells you why Danes are finding ramen too hot to handle.
In a world full of lip-smacking food options, only a select few transcend borders. Only a handful enjoy global likability status. We're talking about the pizza, burger and chicken tikka masala club. And guess who else is a member? Ramen. Haters will say ramen is basically a noodle soup, but it's so much more than that. It's a blend of rich, flavorful broth, a variety of tempting noodles, a selection of juicy meats or tantalizing vegetables. It often climaxes with a perfectly boiled egg. It's a dish that can make your taste buds tingle with excitement as your body thanks you for the warm comfort food. Ramen's popularity doubled after South Korean K-dramas and music bands gave it the spotlight. Whether it's being slurped in the Oscar-winning film Parasite or devoured by the ever-popular BTS boy band, ramen has become a global sensation. The market is overflowing with varieties, all thanks to South Korea's global export boom. But wait, Denmark is throwing a tantrum. Yes, you heard that right. The simple, convenient and oh-so-affordable dish has lost its charm among the Danes. The spicy instant noodle is too hot for them to handle. It has pushed Denmark to recall Korean ramen. From now on, 3 times spicy and hot chicken, 2 times spicy and hot chicken stew won't be gracing Danish shelves. The excuse? Danish officials claim the spice levels could be toxic. The culprit? Capsaicin, essentially a chili pepper extract. In high amounts, capsaicin can lead to nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain and diarrhea, or so the Danes say. According to Denmark's Food Institute, the levels of total capsaicin in a single pack of these noodles are sky high, hence posing a risk of acute poisoning. And their advice is to discard or return the spicy ramen noodles. Danish authorities have issued an advisory for parents, urging them to contact the poison line if their children exhibit symptoms after consuming the noodles. And what about the South Korean company that produces these noodles? Well, they've been left in the dark. They had no clue that Danish authorities had made such a ruling and are now scrambling to investigate the matter. So, Denmark's search for the perfect ramen noodle continues. This isn't the first noodle ban in the country, though. In 2022, Thailand's Lucky Me Pancit Canton noodles were recalled for pesticide traces. So, while the rest of the world revels in the steamy, spicy delight of ramen, Denmark has decided that it just can't handle the spice.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on First Post America.